Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Pagani Design PD-1731. This watch is available from Pagani Design AliExpress official store for €104. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the watch comes in this standard Pagani Design cardboard watch box, and the watch sits on a piece of foam inside a foam cutout panel in the base, as one would expect. Although basic, it does suffice in protecting the watch in shipping from any damage, and I think it's perfectly acceptable to use a basic style of watch box, bearing in mind this is a low tier price point piece at only €104. With the watch, one gets this basic owner's instruction manual, clear concise diagrams. The instructions are in English, and it details the operation of the movement use, which is the Seiko VH31 quartz. This is the plastic guarantee card that comes with the watch, and as usual, the reverse isn't filled in. However, I'm pleased to report the watch is covered by the usual 12-month international guarantee. One also gets this nylon NATO strap, as you can see, stainless steel hardware throughout, mirror polished, two keepers which are stitched either side to prevent them sliding out of position, nice heavy gauge of metal to the 316L grade stainless steel. Quality of the nylon fabric is thick, so it feels quite stiff, but it's going to break in with daily wear and become comfortable. Plenty of holes in it to allow for fine-tuning the length, and it will fit up to an 8-inch wrist. So it's good to get this nylon strap as an alternative to the bracelet, and the quality is acceptable. This is the plastic tag that comes to the watch. One also gets this 1.6mm flat-bladed screwdriver for resizing the screw pins in the bracelets. And lastly, one also gets this Pagani Design branded microfiber polishing cloth. I always think it's a nice touch to get a branded microfiber polishing cloth, irrespective of the price point of a piece. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Pagani Design PD-1731. The watch is clearly an homage to a Grand Seiko piece, so very similar proportions to the Grand Seiko. We have a 38mm case diameter, we have a 45mm lug-to-lug measurement, a thickness of 12.7mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The oyster-style bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 16mm at the 2-button push flip-lock clasp. And as you can see, the flip-lock is signed with the Pagani Design shield emblem to a high standard. I like the shield emblem, and I think Pagani Design should switch over to using the shield on all their clasps rather than engraving longitudinally the Pagani Design text logo. So, as always, I'm going to be critical of this clasp only having 3 micro adjustment holes. I think Pagani Design should have used the 1692 flip-lock clasp, which is Rolex style, and that has a 5mm EasyLink style extension. So really, 3 micro adjustment holes isn't sufficient. It should have 4 micro adjustment holes, and this is pressed stainless steel rather than being a solid milled body to the clasp, so a clear cost-cutting measure. Now, this is the exact same clasp that's used on the PD-1723, which I previously reviewed. That is the vintage Air King Homage. And to cut production costs, Pagani Design are using the same clasps on this 1731 and also the 1723 vintage Air King Homage. So I dislike to see these kind of cost-cutting measures. I'll show you the interior. Now, as you can see, it's poorly finished. If you look closely at the luster of the 316L grade stainless steel, the brushed satin finishing, you can see there are 2 tooling marks which haven't been brushed satin finished out. And this is a disappointment. This is the kind of QC issue one would expect to see resolved with a QC inspection. And this is one of the watches that Pagani Design are using the new case back sticker with a hologram QC inspected sticker on. And this watch has passed QC inspection apparently, but if you look, when I tilt it in the light at the luster, you can see those 2 marks from tooling. So this clearly hasn't been inspected by a QC inspector. Very disappointing finishing. Now, having said that, it does snap shut with a nice positive click, and the flip lock does also have a nice positive secondary click, good firm resistance to the 2-button push trigger, so it does work okay, although there's room for improvement with regards to the quality of the finishing. So with regards to the rest of the specification, we have a double dome sapphire crystal, which is top hat box style, as you can see, and it benefits from blue tinted AR coating on the underside. So on a positive note, I'm pleased to see on this 1731 Pagani Design have introduced blue AR coating. The lack of AR coating was a common criticism for previous watches I've reviewed from Pagani Design, so I like to see the use of the AR coating. They've introduced it on the 1692 Air King and Explorer homages, and also the 1733, which is the Milgauss homage. It's also had the same blue tinted AR coating on the 1723 I previously reviewed, which is the vintage Air King homage. So I like the use of the blue tinted AR coating. It does a good job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the silver applied indices and the silver mirror polished Dauphine hands. The mirror polished Dauphine hands are finished to a good standard. I like the quality of the mirror polishing, and also the proportions are correct. It's often a problem with Chinese low-tier watches, including Pagani Design watches. The hour and minute hand are undersized, they're underproportioned, and therefore the end of the minute hand doesn't extend all the way to the minute ticks in the chapter ring. But if you look at the Dauphine hand, the minute hand, you can see the tip of the minute hand does indeed extend to the white minute ticks. And also the hour hand is correctly proportioned because it extends to the applied indices for the hour marks. So the Dauphine hands are the correct size, and they're also well finished. I also like the needle point second hand, which also is the correct size because it extends all the way to the white minute ticks. Just the right amount of information, because we simply have 100 meters / 330 feet in italic font at the 6 o'clock position. So this is a quartz piece, and therefore there's no need to state any other information. I like the use of the silver mirror polished applied shield emblem at 12 o'clock rather than printing Pagani Design text. So nice clean dial. I like the symmetry of it, the legibility is good, and I like the 3D effect of the applied indices, which are similar to Grand Seiko indices, and this is clearly an homage to a Grand Seiko handset and also the indices on the dial. Interesting choice of finishing to the colour of the dial. It's matte green, but it has a textured finish rather than being glossy enamel green, and I actually like it. I think the matte green dial is very aesthetically pleasing. This is also available in an ice blue colour if the matte green isn't your personal taste, and I think it's a nice colour tone. It really is a nice deep green rather than being too light, and the textured finish does add interest to it. The silver Dauphine hands and also the applied indices, which are three-dimensional, contrast very well. So the legibility is good, and the blue tinted AR coating works very well, although subjectively I think it would be better with clear AR coating rather than blue tinted. Blue tinted AR coating works very well on watches with blue dials because the blue tinting complements the blue dial, but when one has other colours such as this green dial, clear AR coating works well because otherwise one gets a clash of the blue hue of the AR coating with the matte green colour. But however, the AR coating is an enhancement, and I'm pleased to see Pagani Design implement it. With regards to the crown, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel, coin edge finished, and we have a mirror polished shield emblem which is embossed and a matte bead blasted background to it. So very well finished crown. Let's test the screw down crown execution. Absolutely silky smooth. This is 10 out of 10 screw down crown execution. The screw down crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 100 meters of water resistance, which is perfectly acceptable for a daily wear piece. So this is powered by the Seiko VH31 quartz, and therefore it does have a date complication. Underneath the dial there is a date wheel present, so it does have a phantom date setting position. Pulling it out to the first click position on the crown is the date setting position. Pulling it out to the second click position hacks the movement. If you look at the second hand, you can see I have now hacked the movement. So it is possible to stop the VH31 dead to set the time precisely to the second. Now with regards to resistance, it feels much lighter than an NH35A. Absolutely silky smooth both clockwise and anti-clockwise. No back play in the Seiko VH31. It's got light resistance to the gearing in it, but it feels very smooth, so it's an absolute pleasure to set the time. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. So let's test screwing it back down. Immediate thread pickup. This is outstanding, 10 out of 10 screw down crown execution, and it's something that Pagani Design consistently get correct, and this is why I was so disappointed with the 1723 that I previously reviewed, because that crown had a lot of resistance. One had to really push it in with the PT-5000 in order to get the internal thread of the crown to pick up to interface with the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube, but on this 1731 the threads mate, they interface very well, so immediate thread pickup, it's very smooth. Right, so I'll show you the case back. Solid stainless steel case back made from 316L grade, and it provides an effective hermetic seal to 100 meters of water resistance, which is perfectly acceptable. Now I'm going to be critical of this. If you look at the center section, this is clearly a pressed stainless steel case back. They haven't engraved it, so if you look at the embossing, you can see it has a very dull matte finish because it's clearly been pressed with a hydraulic press. And I've looked at this very closely, and you can actually see a ring where the tooling has pressed, it's dug into the case back, and it's got a very dull finish to it, which indicates that the tooling used, the die used, was blunt. And I really think that this is very disappointing. They should have mirror polished the centre section of the case back. Now I've seen other case backs which have similar shield engraving and embossing, and Pagani Design are capable of producing very high quality embossed case backs. This one is very disappointing. When one looks closely at it, you can see the marks of the tooling, so they really need to improve on the quality control of this. Now, the circumference is finished to a good standard because we have flawless mirror polishing, and it's engraved with Pagani Design and also the model number 1731. So the milled slots are finished to a good standard on the circumference, and the mirror polishing is done very well. But the centre section, where the embossing is done, where it's pressed with the hydraulic press, you can see the die was blunt and it's very poorly finished. It has a dull matte finish to it, and it's also scuffed and scratched where the tooling has been blunted. So really they need to improve upon this. It's a very disappointing case back. Right, so let's discuss the bracelet. Now, as a cost-cutting measure, Pagani Design are clearly using the 1723 bracelet, which is used on their vintage Air King Homage that I previously reviewed. They're using the same 1723 bracelet on this 1731. And you can see that this bracelet clearly wasn't made for this watch, because if you look at the lug profile, if you look at the tips to the case, if you look at the lugs, now look at the profile of the end links, which are female pivoted end links, you can see the profile of the end link doesn't look anything like the profile to the lugs. This is like they've put the wrong bracelet on the head of the piece. So I really dislike seeing this cost-cutting measure of using a 1723 bracelet on the 1731. This bracelet was clearly not made for this watch. And if you look at the tips to the lugs, you can see there's an overhang. They have sharp points, whereas the end link, which is female pivoted, has a curved radial profile to it, which is clearly meant to fit the 1723 case, the Air King Homage. Now the other thing is, if you look closely at the end link, you can see there's a deep gouge in it. So it's scuffed and scratched from the tooling. And if you look at the internal of the female pivoted end link, you can see there's also a gouge in it. There's another line, you can see it's scuffed and scratched. There's a deep gouge in it. So poor quality control, and also poor quality finishing. Now, as this is the 1723 bracelet from the vintage Air King Homage, it has exactly the same problem. We have 1 to 2 millimeters of lateral side-to-side play, and also longitudinal play, and also up and down play. In every direction we have 1 to 2 millimeters of play in the female pivoted end link. And also every single one of the pins in the bracelet have play, 1 to 2 millimeters of up and down play, 1 to 2 millimeters of side to side play. So the cumulative effect of this is it rattles, and it rattles on wrist, and it makes a loud audible rattling sound, and one can feel that it's a sloppy bracelet. I'll just check the other side for comparison. Again, we have the same issue. If you look at the profile of the end link, it doesn't fit the pointed profile of the case. The case is clearly an homage to the Grand Seiko case, so it has that angular profile to the flanks and also the lugs. So this end link clearly isn't made to fit the case. It doesn't fit whatsoever. And again, we have the same problem, 1 to 2 millimeters of play, lateral, side to side and up and down, every single direction. And every single one of the links rattles because we have play between the push pins, the pins in the bracelet and the outer links. Now the other problem is there is a gap between the outer links and the center links, and one can actually see daylight through the gap between the outer links and the center links. Now this also suffers with the same problem as the 1723 vintage Air King Homage, which I previously reviewed. The screw pin links kink, and this is because they're too tight. The 1.6mm removable screw pin links don't pull straight, they kink, so one has to manually keep pressing them to get the kinks removed. And when it's on wrist, they actually kink in position like this, so one has to keep flattening the bracelet, and it's very annoying. And the same problem on the other side with the 1.6mm removable screw pin links, they kink. So one has to constantly keep fighting the bracelet, one has to keep pulling it straight and pressing it down to get it to lie flat on the wrist. So this is neither one thing nor the other. We've got loose, rattly links at the N-link end, and then at this end we've got stiff links which keep kinking, and one has to keep manually manipulating the links which kink in order to flatten the bracelet. So it's neither too tight nor too loose. And this is an absolutely dreadful bracelet. It's the identical bracelet used on the 1723, and it's a disappointment that they're using the same poor quality bracelets on this 1731. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, I haven't sized the piece, I've simply taken the watch out of the watch box, and as you can see, it fits my 8-inch wrist with no difficulty whatsoever. It's on micro adjustment 2 of 3, and so therefore this will easily fit up to an 8.5-inch wrist, because as you can see, I can easily fit an index finger underneath the bracelet and clasp at all times. Now, it's a relatively short piece. It's 45mm lug to lug. I consider 48mm to be the sweet spot, regardless of whether you're a collector with a 6 to 7-inch wrist or a 7 to 8-inch wrist respectively. 48mm is the perfect lug to lug measurement. So at 45, this is significantly below the 48mm perfect lug to lug measurement. It's clearly meant to fit collectors with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches. It's also a small head of the piece. This is 38mm. So I would say to you, if you are a collector with a 6 to 7-inch wrist, the fit will be very good, but if you have a larger wrist of 7 to 8 inches, you're going to find the lug to lug measurement to be too short, and you'll also find the head of the piece to be too small. So it's clearly meant to fit collectors with a smaller wrist. On a positive note, it's 12.7mm thick, and as you'll know from my previous reviews, I consider anything under 13mm to be the sweet spot. It will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. So therefore it is potentially an ideal daily wear piece at 12.7, bearing in mind it has a double domed boxed top hat style crystal, so one would expect it to be in excess of 13. At 12.7 it is low profile, and that's the benefit of using a VH31 quartz rather than the NH35A automatic, which would mean it would be thicker. 122 grams with all the links in the oyster style bracelet, so it does feel well balanced. The taper is correct, 20 to 16 is the perfect taper for an oyster style bracelet. So really they've got the proportions correct, but I would say it is only suitable for a smaller wrist. The blue tinted AL coating does a good job of reducing the reflection on the dolphin hands and the applied indices, which are Grand Seiko style. So legibility is good, feel good factor is good, despite the abhorrent bracelet with the stiff kinking links and also the rattle from the loose sloppy links. Right, so let's do a lume test and we'll see how the lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it is disappointing performance. They haven't applied any lume to the applied indices. They've simply put lume on the dolphin hands. And as you can see on the dolphin hands, this is clearly 2 to 3 layers of luminova. It's clearly not C3 superluminova, and this is what 2 to 3 layers looks like versus 5 to 6 layers, which is seen on the better quality watches. Really, there's no point in putting lume on dolphin hands if one is only going to apply 2 to 3 layers, because as you can see, it is now fading very quickly and it will fade to nothing. So really, the performance of the C3 Luminova on the dolphin hands is negligible, and I think Pagani Design shouldn't have put any lume on the watch whatsoever, because one cannot register the lume on the hands with any indices, one cannot see the hour marks in the dark, and so therefore there's no point in luming the hour and minute hand. Very poor performance, and as you can see, it is now fading very quickly to nothing, so a very disappointing performance, and I would like to see Pagani Design improve it to using C3 Superluminova or alternatively BGW9 Superluminova. Right, so let's discuss the movement used in the piece. You'll all be familiar with the Seiko VH31 quartz. It's a personal favourite of mine because it is reliable and accurate. The VH31 is made in Japan and it's been in use since 2016, so at this stage in 2022 it is a reliable, well-proven workhorse quartz movement. It has 2 joules and it has a 2-year battery life, which is perfectly acceptable. The VH31 runs at 4 beats per second, and that's something I really like about it. If you look closely at the second hand, you can see the benefits of it running at 4 beats per second is, rather than ticking at 1 beat per second, which is the typical for quartz movements, this runs at 4 beats per second, so the second hand has a more smoother sweep to it rather than ticking at 1 beat per second. So to put this into perspective, 4 beats per second from the VH31 is similar to the 6 beats per second of the NH35A, so the sweep of the second hand looks similar to an NH35A, which is an automatic rather than a quartz. And I like it. I like the 4 beats per second sweep. I think it looks better, it's more aesthetically pleasing than the 1 beat per second one usually gets. So the VH31 is incredibly accurate. It has a stated accuracy of plus or minus 15 seconds per month. I want you to consider that for a second. That's not 15 seconds per day or per week. Plus or minus 15 seconds per month is better than plus or minus 1 second per day. Incredible accuracy. So really there are no negatives whatsoever to the VH31. It's reliable, well proven, 2-year battery life, and better than plus or minus 1 second per day accuracy, so it is a good choice for this watch. And I would like to see Pagani Design use the VH31 in other models because of its accuracy and also its reliability. It is an outstanding Seiko quartz movement made in Japan. Right, so finally I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So the price point of this watch on the bracelet is €104. Really, to evaluate the piece, one needs to study the quality of the finishing throughout. The quality of the finishing to the head of the piece is very good. Brush satin finishing to the bezel is done to a high standard. Flawless mirror polishing to the flanks of the case. The brush satin finishing to the tops of the lugs is excellent. However, it's let down by the poorly executed pressed case back. As you can see, it's clearly been pressed with a hydraulic press, and the tool, the die used for the pressing, has left marks on the case back in the centre section. So poor quality finishing, poor QC on the case back. And as you know, this uses the abhorrent clasp from the 1723 vintage Air King Homage, so that's another cost-cutting measure. And the main negative of the watch, as I've detailed, is the abhorrent 1723 bracelet. The end links don't fit the case, there's marks, and also it rattles, and of course we have the stiff kinking links. This is one of the worst bracelets I have ever seen on a Pagani Design watch. The same bracelet used on the 1723, absolutely dreadful. I would describe it as a throwaway bracelet. So if you're paying €104 for this 1731, you're really buying it for the head of the piece because the bracelet is disposable. It is a throwaway, poor quality bracelet. I don't think it's worth paying €104 just to get the head of the piece and putting it on a strap. I think there are better alternatives to this piece, and it's a real disappointment because I'm pleased to see the use of blue AR coating, and I'm also pleased to see the use of the VH31. They are strong points. But at €104, this simply is poor quality, and I consider it to be poor value. So for those reasons, I cannot recommend it to you for your consideration. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Pagani Design PD-1731. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.